Mr. Lloyd, if you can hear me, we can have the welcoming remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Florence. I was just rejoining as a panelist. Thank you so much. Let me also put on my video so that you can all see me. Very good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to this very important webinar looking at the implementation of the Gender Action Plan to try and promote and raise awareness on the Gender Action Plan, the gender responsive action towards the impact of climate change. This webinar really is coming at a very important juncture in the life of the Center for Human Rights. This is so because on the 4th of May, the Center launched the Green Justice Africa campaign on the 4th of May, and it was quite a successful launch. And this webinar, I think it is a series of various activities that will be going on throughout the year, culminating in the COP27 in November that will take place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. So really, this is, I think, perhaps the first event after the launch of the Green Justice Africa campaign that happened on the 4th of May. So we are really grateful to the clinic and the Women's Rights Unit for arranging this webinar. And I'm really grateful as well to the panel of speakers that have been put together, or all the honorable members of parliament that are on the platform, colleagues from academia, colleagues from civil society organizations, as well as climate justice activists. Welcome, and thank you so much for making time to really enrich our discussions during this particular webinar. So it's really important, I think, as Africa, for us to start to look at the gendered responses to the impact of climate change on the continent. One of the, I think for me at a personal level, having had some interactions with some women who have been affected by climate justice, is the impact on livelihoods, especially for women. As we know, many women on the continent are involved perhaps in agricultural activities and related activities. And because of the climate crisis, their livelihoods are usually affected, and they end up not being able to continue with agricultural activities. Also, access to health for women may also be affected because in so many of the instances that we have noted on the continent, hospitals have been destroyed as a result of cyclones, floods, and other related severe weather impacts. Another aspect that is quite disturbing, which we witnessed during Cyclone Idai in 2019, which affected Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe, is the issue of sexual abuse of women, especially when members of the military were deployed to hand out food baskets to people affected by the cyclones and the floods. It was really disturbing to hear so many incidences of the sexual abuse of women by members of the security forces who had been deployed to assist. And they ended up sexually abusing women so that women would be subjected to such horrendous abuses in exchange for food. And I hope, these are some of the things that this webinar will be looking at and discussing and coming up with solutions to really mitigate some of the negative impacts of climate change on the continent. And I say so because women have been disproportionately affected, and yet they have contributed the least to the gas emissions at a global level, and especially women in Africa, because I think when you look at Africa, Africa has contributed to less than 10% of global gas emissions globally, and yet they are the most impacted by these gas emissions that have really caused the climate crisis. And I mean, like I said, I was also witnessing women who have been affected by heat waves, because now they have to be selling their wares in markets around the continent. And because of the heat, they are affected and they are unable to really conduct their work to earn a living because of the climate crisis. So really, this event really comes at a very good time for us to examine what can be done, what is the role of members of parliament, what is the role of civil society, what is the role of academia, what is the role of international financial institutions, perhaps, in trying to support women to mitigate the negative and deleterious impacts of climate justice on the continent. So thank you very much and welcome to everyone. I would like to wish the clinic and the Women's Rights Unit a very successful webinar. And I would also want to wish the panel of speakers enriching and fruitful discussions. Thank you so much for making time to be here. And all the best to the participants who have also joined this particular webinar. It is my wish and my hope that the webinar is going to be beneficial to whatever you are doing, whether it may be advocacy, whether it might be research. We really appreciate that. And as you know, the Center for Human Rights is both an academic institution promoting research and knowledge production, but also on the other hand, it is an NGO that is promoting advocacy on pertinent human rights issues to protect the rights of the most marginalized, that include persons with disabilities, women, children, and sexual and gender minorities. So thank you so much and wish everybody successful deliberations in this webinar. Thank you, Florence. Over to you and the best of luck. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lloyd, for those welcoming remarks. I think you touched on the most important aspect, which is the gendered impacts of climate change on women. And so to start us off, we'll have our first panelist. We have Ms. Olivia Adhiambo, who is a climate policy expert. Ms. Olivia is a seasoned climate adaptation specialist. She has 12 years experience in addressing climate change policy and adaptation challenges across Africa. She has worked on campaigns, project designs, and implementation and policy advocacy. She's passionate about creating spaces for women and youth in tackling challenges related to climate change. Ms. Olivia will be talking to us about the gendered effects of climate change. Ms. Olivia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Florence, for this opportunity. And good day to all the panelists and the participants in this webinar. It is not a secret that climate change affects women and men differently. What remains as a gap is the understanding of how these effects are. So in my presentation, I'm going to highlight 6 ways in which women and men feel the impacts of climate change differently. So the first way in which these impacts are felt more by women is through agriculture production. And the second way is through food security. The third way is in health. We know that men and women are wired differently in terms of our body composition. And for that reason, climate change has effects on women and men in different ways. Energy and water resources are also affected by climate change, and as a result, this impacts the ability of men and women to access these resources when they become scarce. Climate-induced migration has been a phenomenon that has been observed, especially in areas where extreme weather events are happening in a sequential way. The sixth way is through climate-related disasters. And our earlier speaker talked of a recent phenomenon that happened in Mozambique, Hurricane Idai, and he has even elaborated on some of the points that I'm going to talk about. So when we look at the traditional roles and responsibility of women in the African traditional setup, they're often responsible for gathering and production of food, collecting water and fuel wood that is used for heating and cooking. As climate change becomes more and more pronounced, these tasks are becoming more difficult as a result of extreme events such as droughts and floods. We find that women and girls are walking longer distances in order to access water for cooking and household use, in order to access fuel wood that will be used for heating and cooking. And this has direct impacts on the health of women and in their ability to perform other roles. For example, the ability of a girl to go to school. In agriculture production, in our African traditional setup, we have seen that crop failure as a result of sporadic rains or delayed rains has affected our food security systems. And we have seen malnutrition, even starvation, become reality in many homes and in many communities. In our traditional setup, men are often expected to eat before girls. This selective malnutrition of less important members, and I put less in quotes, of less important members of the family, can also be used as a survival strategy for the family. Women often face the most negative forms of discrimination, and as a result, suffer from malnutrition and even starvation in most cases. When it comes to the economic aspects of agricultural production, women are often the most negatively economically impacted by crop failures, and this is because they have fewer economic resources to fall back on in terms of crises such as droughts and floods. This has also huge implications on a woman's ability to recover and to continue with their productive work in the crop fields. When you look at health, there are huge implications, and research has shown that women are hugely impacted by health-related effects of climate change. I will give an example. If a woman is already undernourished or starving due to underproduction, due to limited food resources within the homestead, this woman's body will not be healthy enough to fight diseases, and as a result, she will be directly or more, she will be more susceptible to diseases. And we have seen even more severe health impacts on women and girls. In the developed world, we have seen statistics show that heat strokes affect women more than they affect men. And we have seen rising cases of preeclampsia in pregnancies during prolonged drought seasons, where there is a lot of heat and a woman's body cannot cope with the heat. Climate-induced migration also affects women and girls disproportionately. Women and girls often fall victim to displacement as a result of extreme weather events and are susceptible to gender-based violence due to this displacement. However, despite women being disproportionately affected by climate change, they play a critical role in climate change adaptation and mitigation. They have the knowledge and understanding of what is needed to adapt to this changing environment and what is needed to cope in order to be able to become resilient. But despite this knowledge, women are still largely untapped resource. This is because they have restricted rights to land, they have low access to financial resources, trainings, and technology that would help them to to cope, and also limited access to political decision-making spheres often prevent women and girls to play an active role in tackling climate change, among other environmental challenges. Thank you. Back to you, Florence.
Thank you so much, Olivia, for those insightful remarks on the gendered impacts of climate change, particularly on women and girls. We shall now move to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Honorable Christine Kaya. Honorable Christine Kaya is a member of parliament representing Chiboga in Uganda. She's also the Shadow Minister for Water and Environment and serves on the Parliamentary Climate Change Committee for Natural Resources and the Natural Resources Committee. She was previously the coordinator for Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change and served as chairperson on the Ugandan Parliamentary Forum. She's also a member of the Green Climate Fund Designation Authority Committee and serves as the current director for the African Coalition and Green Growth. Honorable Kaya, she'll be speaking to us about climate action in the East Africa. Honorable Christine. Honorable Christine, if you can hear us. Honorable Christine, can you hear us? Okay, as we resolve the issue with mic and video, we can move to Honorable James Ater. Honorable James Ater is the member of Senate for South Sudan. He was on the, oh, sorry, I can see Honorable Christine with us, so we can start. Honorable Christine. My apologies for that. We will now move to Honorable James as we fix the issue with Honorable Christine. Honorable James is the member of Senate in South Sudan. He's a member of the Council of States in Juba, and he's been the deputy chair since 2016. He was appointed the deputy chair of the Standing Specialized Committee on Finance and Economic Development. He was previously appointed to the member of Council of States in 2011 to 2016, where he served as the deputy chair of the Standing Specialized Committee on Political and Foreign Relations. Honorable James. Honorable James will be talking to us about climate action in South Sudan. Honorable James, you may have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Florence Otieno. Good afternoon to everybody. First of all, as you all know, South Sudan, I may take you quickly to give you a background of South Sudan. South Sudan is situated in Eastern Africa with an estimated population of 12 million people, mainly dependent on livestock, farming, and fishing. South Sudan as a country gained independence on 9th July 2011 after successful secession from Sudan via referendum provided for in CPA Peace Accord. Sudan was engulfed in one of the longest civil wars in the world that took 21 years and plunged right into another war just 2 years after independence. The trial of history and natural disasters have not only made us a poverty-stricken society, but impacted negatively on our women in every aspect. Despite this fact, there is commitment to influence the status quo and alleviate conditions of women. What could be done for women and girls in South Sudan? The government and its stakeholders, we have the partners. Since during the war, we have the partners that were helping South Sudan, and they are still here. They are still helping South Sudanese. So the government and the stakeholders have shown a lot of commitment towards women empowerment and support. The key points here are the wider political participation of women. And you know, in South Sudan, we have 35% affirmative action, which actually all the levels of government, there is participation of women. And currently, the Speaker of the National Legislature, Honorable Nunu Kumba, is a woman. Here in the Council of States, we also have the first Deputy Speaker, Mary Ayan Mejo, is also a woman. So the wider participation of women in decision making is actually one of the key points that the government has actually made positive towards the impact of climate change on women. Number two, we have women economic empowerment. This empowerment actually is in terms of a small business at the state level. And also we have in all the states, we have a women group who are doing different activities, economic activities being farming or this small enterprise. And then number three, we have gender laws reform and ratification of international women rights protocols. And I think I will take you through later on. And these protocols are there, and the government have ratified all these protocols. Number four, we have access services to health and education. And most especially on education, the government have prioritized the girl-child education. And we also have support from the partners. I can bring a few examples of, we have what we call GES education, that is for girls education, and this support is from European Union. And also we have faith-based organizations, like in Rumbek, we have one school that called Loreto Senior Secondary School, supported by the Catholic Church. And it has a number of good, girls who are taking education in that school. And it is actually at the national level. All girls come from all the states of South Sudan. Number five, we have a conducive environment for gender equality, which the government is trying actually. It's not that very conducive. I did not take you through, climatical hazards that are affecting women, but the government is trying actually to create a conducive environment for gender equality. Number six is to address gender-based violence. For example, institutions of social court and a special court, and to urgently address them. And then the role of women organizations is in South Sudan, we have UN Women. This organization is also supporting women in various aspects. The government actually have ratified agreements, and these agreements, like Paris Agreement 2015, and we have Kyoto Convention in Japan, and then Climate Change Convention, and United Nations Framework Convention. The only problem is that these laws have not been domesticated by the government, and it is actually the work of the parliament to domesticate these laws. So in short, this is the little that I can present to you, and thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Honorable James, for those insightful comments. You've touched on so many important things. You've talked about economic empowerment of women. You've talked about the role of women's rights organizations, and that most countries have actually ratified the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. Thank you so much. We'll now move to the next speaker. I believe Honorable Christine Kaya is with us. I'll just go through her bio again as she unmutes and puts on her video. Honorable Christine Kaya is a member of parliament representing Chiboga in Uganda. She's also the Shadow Minister for Water and Environment and serves on the Parliamentary Climate Change Committee and Natural Resources Committee. She previously coordinated the Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change in Uganda and served as the chairperson for the Ugandan Parliamentary Forum. She's a member of the Green Climate Fund Designated Authority Committee and serves as the current director for the African Coalition on Green Growth. Honorable Christine.
You have to, hello? You have to switch
Honorable
my
Christine, we can hear you.
Can hear you, Honorable.
Yes, greetings to you all. I take this opportunity to thank you who have put up this coordination on the discussions about the Gender Action Plan. I form part of the gender negotiation team of the UNFCCC in Uganda, and I was privileged to take part in the Bonn sessions of 2017 that led the establishment of the Gender Action Plan instrument, which was geared at ensuring that most women have full participation and participation that is meaningful, and that we have a guideline for all the policies that different countries were supposed to come up with in relation to climate change management. And as Uganda in 2020, we established the climate change law, and the Gender Action Plan helped us a lot in ensuring that gender mainstreaming components are included in the law. And exactly this is what we hope that most countries would adopt. It is very disturbing for many of the countries to come up with gender sensitive indicators that are climate proof, but the instrument is helping us, especially when you look at the 5 thematic areas of capacity building, to ensure that at least there are more women who are well versed with the components of the convention, the UNFCCC, but as well to inform our different women at all levels that when climate change affects us, we are affected differently, and it is us women who suffer most. So that capacity building component in the gap is very important. The other important aspect is the gender balance, where we encourage women leadership. You know, we usually tend to think that probably women scientists or women environmentalists should not mind about the leadership, especially the political leadership in their respective countries, which we feel is important. Like I've been introduced, I was just a staff of parliament, but I saw that there is a gap. We were just jumping on members of parliament to interest them in climate change issues. So I was like, since I'm an environmentalist, I've been in the climate change management debates for some time. Let me go and cover up that gap. Let me place my climate change in the political decision-making tables. So that is why we want more climate management activists to join the different leaderships, and we feel this instrument is helping us a lot in this. The third component being coherency, paying attention, especially to the implementation of Agenda 2030 is important, and also to link up with the different conversion instruments is very important at this time. We do not want to lose the gender aspects at every moment in climate management, whether in advocacy, whether in material support, whether in service delivery. This one should come out clearly. Then the other component is gender responsive implementation, where GAP emphasizes the need to work with parliamentarians, to work with UN agencies, but also to work with the climate technology network in ensuring that we generate enough space, but we generate enough capacity of women. Because I believe UN women, if they incorporate the component of climate change within their subject matter, we feel we are increasing on the number of women that will put some efforts in ensuring that the climate shocks do not affect our women to the extent we're seeing now. And then the last one being monitoring and reporting. And we were guided about the way we are supposed to report sex aggregated data, and all the time looking at the different gender within our societies as we report, the elder, the youth, the children, how are the effects of climate change coming in, but we needed a different gender to show us how they are being affected, such that for those people who are designing programs, projects, and checking progress of what we have done, at least the sex aggregated information comes out clearly. So within the Gender Action Plan, a number of stakeholders were listed. Most important is the UN, and then the Climate Technology Center. Technology needs assessment in East Africa. Uganda, we also established the assessment. We finalized with it. And right now, we are generating a number of projects in line with the assessments. But previously, before 2017, it was a serious challenge. Very many countries were advocating for technologies, labor-saving technologies to reduce the workload of women. But as countries, we actually didn't know what we want. We hadn't even prioritized which technology would help us. So as we come up with programs, as we design projects, we still need to emphasize the need to provide technologies, because this is where most women are affected. If we are to build the resilience of women, we need to reduce on the time they spend in gardens, the time they spend on water points, the time they spend in looking for energy, and at the same time using the energy that they have. The use of biomass is time consuming, but also the safety of the women is at stake. So the most important issue is now to look at the coordination of the implementation of the Gender Action Plan in the different countries is a challenge right now. Because at first we had the climate and gender negotiation groups within the countries. And then when the Gender Action Plan came in, the reporting as if for the Gender Action Plan is far different from the thematic NFCC reporting within the biannual reports. So I feel we need a coordination within our countries. And who should form the coordination team? And who should host this coordination platform is an issue. Should it be the Ministry of Finance? Should it be the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment? So that is an issue. We need the CS coordination, and then compose based on the advice from the GAP. The UN must come out clearly. The Climate Technology Center must have liaison staff in the different countries to form part of the coordination. And then we prioritize as countries, because based on the 5 thematic gap areas, not all countries are at par with moving with all the 5 thematic areas. Probably some countries, their women's capacity in climate change is somewhere. Probably they need monitoring and reporting, coherence, probably. So as countries, we need to sit and prioritize further. Out of the 5 thematic groups of the GAP, each country should prioritize and then come up with action plans. And then the public participation is lacking. This is an instrument that is too much with us, because many members who form the gender thematic group do not have the funds to move out there to engage the public in pushing for the implementation of the gender action plan. And then we have respective gender ministries within our countries. It is very important that as they revise, as they review these plans, these strategies, these laws, it is important to also look at this plan. So we are advising that staff and technical people from our respective gender ministries need to come on board. We need to test them such that they also keep a look at this most challenging item in the livelihood options for most women. And then the access to information. I know many countries have established MRVs where they are recording the rate at which they emit, and it is important that the implementation of gender action plan and its progress is incorporated within the reporting framework, such that more people get information and also devise means. But it is very important that trainings in negotiations for most women continue, and also subsequent participation in the convention meetings, especially the UNFCCC. Now that in June, we shall be, there is a planned Bonn meeting, but I'm wondering how many women have been planned to actually take part in this meeting. And we are also planning for the COP, the next COP in Egypt. So how have countries established the coordination teams to ensure that at least within the next COP, we are able to report about the progress of implementation of this gap? So because I see most gender thematic members are volunteers, so a volunteer is not easy to account. So they are volunteers. We must have some concrete conclusion on the people that we are tasking to give us accountability as far as the implementation of the gap is concerned. And then we, as different countries, we constitute a number of professionals, but technology, implementation of technology is very important. Some people were even laughing at us when this instrument was established, that, oh, you have an instrument, but you don't have a financing commitment. So the gender action plan didn't have a commitment that we follow up. And usually the allocated amounts, once they come into consolidated funds, this one sometimes may not become a priority. So we need to ring fence funding for the implementation of the gap. And then use provisions to mainstream in the subsequent climate change policies, laws, guidelines. But all in all, we would like our women and all activists in climate change to always keep referring to this document, referring to this instrument, such that we do have gender-sensitive climate-related policies and laws. Thank you. That is what I had to share with you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Christine, for those insightful remarks. I can't even begin to break down everything you've said. You've packed so much in the little time we gave you. But a few things stood out for me. You mentioned the importance of having women and discuss these climate issues within the politics. So it's important to have women who are now occupying those spaces and actually talking about climate change. We talked about monitoring and reporting. You also talked about financing, which is something that is very important. And I think that sets the base for our next speaker, who will be talking to us about the financing of climate change. Honorable Christine, please stay with us as we'll have a short plenary session for people to ask you questions. But thank you so much for the insightful remarks. We shall now move to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Faisal Isadin Mohammed. Faisal is a climate change, environment, and sustainable development expert. He's currently the program manager, environment and climate at the Embassy of Ireland in Dar es Salaam. He's also the former African regional facilitator for major groups and stakeholders under the United Nations Environmental Programme. His experience draws from pioneering and engineering preparations and implementation and evaluation of policies and projects related to climate change and environment and sustainable development. He also has vast experience working with diverse stakeholders, including government, development partners, civil society, and communities. At the regional and global levels, he's been following closely the discussions and negotiations on environment and climate change and sustainable development. He's done this through the United Nations Environmental Assembly, the African Ministerial Conference on Environment, and the UN High-Level Political Forum, UNFCCC, the COPs, and climate funding bodies such as the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund. Mr. Issa holds a Master's of Science from Zumbe University and a Bachelor's degree in Political Science from the University of Dar es Salaam. Mr. Faisal, welcome.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. So I've shared the slides. I hope also you can see the slides. So to start off in terms of financing climate responses, let's understand in terms of climate finance. Unfortunately, there is no agreed climate finance definition under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So we use general definition. Actually, at the moment, UNFCCC is doing a consultation to gather information to come up with a general or universal climate finance definition. But the general one is flow of funds, either from public or private entities to mostly developing country to address climate change. So whether it's adaptation or mitigating to climate change. There are a number of sources as part of the climate financing. One, multilateral, and this can be linked to two. One under UNFCCC, you can include here Global Environment Facility, Green Climate Fund, and sub-funding under CHEF, also Special Climate Fund, and also Least Developed Country Fund. But also you have other small funding like Adaptation Fund, which basically focus on adaptation. But others, as part of the multilateral, you could see multilateral banks, you have World Bank, Africa Development Bank, and the likes. Apart from multilateral, we also have bilateral sources, including between countries and countries, including through their development agency. So whether if it's FCDO or JICA or USAID, that is another area of support, or it could be direct between countries to country. Private sector playing other role in terms of the sources of funding, and also philanthropies as part of their contribution to funding. And this can be either directly accessed by the government entities, or it could be a consortium between government entities and non-state actors, or it could be a direct support to a government through a budget support or through a specific program. So a number of issues we need to understand there. But linking to our discussion today, why do we talk about climate finance and gender? We have had before from previous speakers in terms of the setup, especially in African countries, where the cultural setup put a burden to women. Women are more affected by climate change because of the cultural setup, whether lack of access to financing, which limit their capacity to address climate change issue or leverage on opportunity from climate change. The different roles assigned, which again put more burden to them. But also specific on climate finance, if you look at the figures, you'd see the very low climate intervention that receive climate finance specifically, or with the gender length. I think it's around 30 or less percent of the total climate finance flow globally. And then the question would be how best to do it in terms of integrating gender as part of climate financing and be able to have equal access to all these sources that I mentioned earlier. So one should have a specific gender equality and gender empowerment guiding principle or safeguards for this all instrument of climate financing, to make sure that gender aspects are integrated as part of the financing, but also as part of the program. Should have specific performance objective and result measurement frameworks, so that by the time the program are designed, whether it's a primary or secondary objective, should include gender issues. And as part of the result framework, we should make sure that they are embedded. And this is not just including number of women and men, but more on having impact on women's life and give them more opportunity to provide input and participation. And that is also another area that we need to look at. It's not a ticking box that women were there, but how meaningful participation was there in terms of designing, implementing, and evaluating the impact of intervention or specific program. But also mechanism should be put in place to enhance access of such climate finance, especially to local women groups, because we know one area is climate finance can be accessed through an entity, but we should have more enhanced direct access to these local women. So that also is another area that we need to look at. But after all of that, we should have a regular audit and evaluation that have a gender lens to make sure that all this has been done as stipulated in the first option, where we have a guardian and safeguard to follow. So those are the areas that we need to look at. So to capture a bit, we looked at the climate financing as a definition, look at the sources that are there, and then finalize with why gender consideration is important as part of climate finance, and what can be done to move forward. So I'll stop it there, and more discussion will follow as part of the plenary discussion. Thank you. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Faisal, for the comments on climate financing, which is a very important subject, because you can talk about all the interventions, but without financing, as Honorable Christine had pointed out, you wouldn't be able to go really far. I've been informed that Honorable Tatenda is on. I'm not sure if she's able to log in, but we can then move to the next speaker and then have Honorable Tatenda come after the next speaker. Our next speaker is Hamira Kobusinje. Hamira is a climate activist from Uganda. She believes that climate change is also a gender and reproductive health issue. Her passion and desire to see a world with climate justice and gender justice. After realizing that climate change affects women differently, she has devoted her time to making tangible contributions towards this cause. She raises awareness about climate change and starts up conversations, even on social media, to reach as many people as possible. Her most recent work involves tackling of fossil fuel pollution in Port Harcourt. She believes you can't achieve climate justice without gender justice, and climate change does affect women differently. She currently holds the responsibility of training and sensitizing new activists on the African continent through Rise Up movement skills sharing meetings. Hamira, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Florence. I'm happy to be here. Like I said, my name is Kobusinje. My name is Kobusinje Hamira, and I am happy to be here with presenting with you great people of our continent. My passion is fighting for equitable climate action and also demanding for climate finance, like the previous speaker talked about. I am an activist, and I'll briefly tell you what I do. I am the voice of the planet. I speak about climate change and climate crisis and sensitize the masses about it. When I joined climate activism, it was a self-development journey for every activist. So we made so many mistakes as we came on board. We had the passion, we had the zeal, but we did not have the technique and how to do it right. I started with, I had the idea of training new activists or training people about climate, because even before I became an activist, I knew there was change in climate patterns. Weren't having the rain the way it was coming. It was so dry. The sun would shine so much and it would be so hot, and our plants would wither. Because I've trained women in our local groups before on small scale farming, that is farming on our small verandas in the slums. For us who don't have big compounds or big gardens. So that was what I used to do before I became a climate activist. I remember this particular time we went and trained women on how to grow vegetables on their verandas. And because Honorable Kaya comes from Uganda, so she knows how small our verandas can be in the slums. So you would train women to grow small vegetables like eggplants, like dodo on their verandas. But it's disappointing when you are trying to tell someone this is a ray of hope and this is going to help you and your family. You're going to at least feed your family in a place where you'd have bought posho and then started looking for sauce. Money for sauce. You only have to buy now posho and then have the sauce in your small garden on your veranda. It was disappointing when that time the rain didn't come. All the crops died out. We lost almost everything. And I didn't know as a person that actually this was climate change and it was happening. So it's until the lockdown came and I educated myself and I met people like my Vanessa, people like Evelyn, Acham, and then I read about these things. Then I went ahead to read about Greta. And when you read about these things, you actually connect the dots. So when I found that out, I decided to dive into the books more, read more about climate change. But also after I got good at at my knowledge, I decided to sensitize communities. So many of us go through things. My grandmother sometime back told me when they were growing up, the rains were predictable. You could plant your crops and then yield your crops, which is not happening right now. Right now you plant and the crops die in the ground. It's too hot, the sun shines a lot, and when it rains, we see a lot of flooding happen and washing away, and erosion happening, that is washing away all the soil nutrients. So my job as Kopsinje, Hamira, I teach communities on what actually is happening and on how they can go about it. I also teach young activists all over Africa. I've taught activists about how to go about their job, how to train their people in their languages. I can't speak English and my local language, but I cannot speak French, or I cannot speak Arabic, but I have trained people who can speak English and Arabic to train the people in their communities better in their local languages. But even as we do it, we only do these things on Zoom calls. We have our own issues. So there's a lot of, it's harsh out there, and like the previous speakers said, we need a gender equitable solution to climate change. And we have seen so many, every time we go, you go to out in the communities, you notice women are affected more, women are losing out more, women are suffering more. But again, also women are the front line of this. Much as we are going through this the most, we're actually doing the most to make sure there's a solution for climate change. That being said and done, I'll talk about what would help female activists do about their job most. And I believe if we got support from leaders, I am an activist, and we are doing a campaign and sensitizing the communities about the eco pipeline that is happening in East Africa. And instead of our leaders bringing us on board and talking to us and finding out why this is happening and why we are against this, I myself have done a campaign from a different part of the continent, and we have seen people go through what's the aftermath of fossil fuel does. It's no secret that fossil fuel is the number one major polluter or emitter of CO2 into the atmosphere. So when activists that are informed and that have read the science and that are following the science talk about these things and try to educate our population about these things, our leaders, yesterday or the other day in the news here in Uganda, our leaders are coming out to actually want us imprisoned or something like that. So I think we are fighting for the planet. We are doing the right thing for our planet. It's not that we are against our planet. I love that jobs are being created, but I also know what happened in the Niger Delta when they tried to process fossil fuels in the earlier years. Right now, you can literally not breathe in Port Harcourt. Children are going to school and they're breathing in soot. So I know, much as all these things are happening, but we have data, and I believe our leaders, thank God honorables are on the call, our leaders should not look at us activists as enemies. We are friends of the planet. I am in the age of where I am now thinking about marriage and having children. I am thinking about where my kids are going to live in 20 years from now, in 10 years from now. You understand? So when we come out and talk about such things, we're not saying that we are enemies of progress of our countries. I love my country more than anyone does. It's the only thing I know. But if I've seen it happen from somewhere else, a wise man once said, a knowledgeable person or a wise person learns from his mistakes, but a wiser person learns from someone else's mistakes. And at this time in our lives, our mistakes, we should learn from the mistakes of what happened in Algeria and Nigeria and in the Niger Delta and in all our places where we've had oil spills and all these things. Because yes, we are bring all this progress in our communities and in our continent, but when the aftermath comes, are we ready to deal with these things? Because let me tell you one thing, we only contribute 4%, less than 4% of CO2 emissions in the whole globe, in the whole universe, I mean on the whole planet of Earth, Africa contributes less than 4%, but we are suffering the most. Trust me, when we go and gauge who is emitting most, what I emit in Uganda as Hamira Kovsinjo in 3 months, someone in the global north emits that in 3 days. So every month I emit, every month someone is, what I emit in 1 month, someone out there is emitting in 1 day. You understand? And if we make ourselves major polluters, but again also destroying our people and our communities and our biodiversity, because they've all told us that ECOP is bringing this kind of development and everything, but we already have kids drop out of school, and these children are our girls, they're our daughters, they're our sons. We have already had fishermen lose their jobs because they cannot fish from the land, the waters that once belonged to them and once gave them jobs. We already have farmers lose their land and their biodiversity, but they were farming on this land. So when we talk about these things, I want the leaders here, the good thing is we have honorables on this call. I want the leaders here to know that climate activists are not enemies of their countries or of their communities. We are the best friends our communities have, because we think for people and communities and not about profits. Most of the money that is going to come out of all these ventures and all these companies that are coming to exploit us, they are carrying it back to their countries. And we are going to stay behind with the aftermath of diseases, respiratory cancer, respiratory TB, all these diseases that can be caused with all this pollution. So me, I believe, yes, climate activism, we are doing our best with the small resources we have. I had issues with my internet that time. I told Florence, yes, we have small resources, but we're doing our best utilizing them because we are fighting for a good cause. When the climate finance comes and what we are advocating for, and when it comes, we shall probably have something to use to carry out our job, our work. But maybe the money will come, and I'll be happy when it comes. But till then, let's not succumb to greenwashing of where Total tells us they're planting trees because they're going to emit 34 million tons is a lot of emissions for a small country, Uganda. That is 7 times what we're emitting right now. And trust me, the 15% that is left behind, or let's say 30%, because Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania have 30% combined, that is left behind, is not enough for us to take care of our people, for us to treat our people, for us to lose our diversity, to lose our tourism industry, to lose our farming industry. So as I conclude, yes, we have advocated for a separate fund to be set aside for women at the front line of the climate action and that are advocating for climate action, and we shall continue to advocate for that. But I've taken this responsibility because I see so many honorables from all over the continent on the call to tell them that much as well they're running their political agendas and everything, climate activists are not your enemies. We are not here to fight you. We are here to fight for our countries. And for us, we put communities and human beings and humanity and lives before money and profits. And also another thing is there are so many other renewable energies we can invest in than fossil fuels. And yeah, thank you very much. And I'll continue advocating for equitable climate action where women are involved. And yes, in case of anything, I think I've said my piece, Florence. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hamira. That was such an insightful comment. I think you have really spoken about the journey that climate activists who you're representing today on this call go through, and particularly the gendered impacts of the climate change on women. I liked how you drew a direct link between climate change and school dropout levels, particularly for girls. You have also called out the members of parliament present. You're emphasizing that climate activists are not the enemies, and there's need to work together to ensure that we are able to tackle climate change. I think you've also brought out the fact that the least responsible for climate change are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of climate change, which is very important as you leave this call to know that in as much as you talk about Africa's emissions not being as large as the global north's emissions, we are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of this, and women are the ones going to bear the brunt. I'm happy that I'll be having Honorable Tatenda come in right after you. She'll be talking about climate action in South Africa and maybe addressing the issues you've also raised about coming together with climate activists. Thank you so much, Hamira. Honorable Tatenda will be taking the floor next. Honorable Tatenda is a member of parliament from Seke Chikoba constituency in Zimbabwe. She's the assistant speaker in parliament. She's also the chairperson for the youth caucus in parliament. She's a member of the Pan-African Parliament. She's also the Secretary General for the African Parliamentaries Network on Development and Evaluation. In Parliament, she has been strong to advocate for the rights of women and youth, and in particular, she advocates for youth's access to land, economic and political opportunities. Honorable Tatenda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. And let me also first start by thanking you for giving us this opportunity where we get to converge and be able to speak about issues concerning women and also climate action, which I think is at the top of everyone's mind. I'm sorry, I am in Tanzania and network is not very well because I'm now in Morogoro. So I'm not going to be switching on my video because I think the network is quite a problem. So let me start my presentation. The question that I was supposed to respond to is what is in for women and young girls? What is the action now? And I think we need to be quite clear that indeed, when we talk about people that are greatly affected by climate change today, it's actually the women and also the girls in the marginalized communities. And I think the first thing we need to really do is for us to make sure we involve them, be it in the designing, be it in the implementation of climate response actions, so that we can ensure that we have got equal sharing of benefits. You see, the challenge that we have is that we are in a patriarchal society. And because of that, you realize that men dominate when it comes to representation in most areas. So I feel the other issue that we need to really be able to do is to increase on women's representation. We need representation in parliaments so that at least we have women who can be there to make sure at least they lead on the adoption of climate change policies, resulting in lower emissions. And I think even at all levels that we can think of, the participation of women, especially on natural resource management, is associated with better resource governance and conservation outcomes. We need to understand the nature of women, that they're very good, they're very much concerned when it comes to resource governance. And I believe that they are also very important when it comes to conserving issues. And I think this is one thing we need to do. We also need to go forward and make sure that we expand when it comes to women's access to productive resources. I think this has been mentioned by all the other previous speakers, that when it comes to resources are also very, very important. It will increase even in terms of more production. It will increase in us having even innovative ways that we can then be able to do, and resources that will be able to make people be able to mitigate. So the issue of resources is very, very important. We believe that it's important for women to be also having alternative sources of resources so that at least they can be able to yield more. And even if you look at what has happened in climate change, you realize that most of the times is we need to be having mitigation ways. And if you look at it, it's because the women will not be having the resources. So it's quite important for us to also be making sure that at least we have more resources coming through to women so that they can then be having ways that they can mitigate whenever they comes to these issues. And again, we also need to understand the issue of leadership, which I had mentioned earlier on. You know, women have been, not that I'm saying it because I'm a woman, but you realize that they've got some transparency which is within them. And I think we need more increased transparency when it comes to issues to do with climate change. You realize that even the proportion of women, be it in boards, is very, very minimum. So for us to be able to address the issue of climate change and the issue of climate interventions, we need to be having more women coming through, and we need effective collective action against climate change, which will require a lot of people to be able to look at economic value of issues. And when you look at it, women are very much at the toe and at the pro of that. And again, we also need to come to realize that we need to increase an investment when it comes to climate interventions. You realize that it seems as if climate interventions become a second priority. I've seen that in a lot of African countries who are very much exposed to floods, who are very much exposed to a lot of issues whereby they continue having droughts, which is quite a challenge. So I think there's quite an effective way that we need to shift focus towards a collective well-being, and for us to also be able to strengthen economies without increasing a lot of emissions that we're having as a country. The issue of women is very, very at the top of everyone's mind. For you realize that even the issue of sexual and reproductive health rights is also essential, so that at least we can have gender equality. And also, whenever we have gender equality, that means we are working towards us having climate action, which truly speaking, we need women to be there at the top of it and making sure that they increase the visibility of women, the inclusion of women, so that at least they can make all these decisions. We also need to strengthen our health systems. Let me tell you a very good example, which I've seen happening. A lot of women, whenever it is cold, you realize that they start having backaches, especially those that have given birth. So what are we saying? We're saying there's need for us to also create a budget which is pro-women, which can also make sure that at least even when women get all these changes in climate that would come through, you realize at least that they would be having some medication that they have. And also they've got health systems that are in place for them to be able to mitigate. I will tell you myself, every time when it's cold, I always have a backache. So that alone, I think we need to make sure that at least we increase more when it comes to that. And again, even when it comes to sexual and reproductive health services, we need them. I feel that every nation should safeguard recent gains made in environmental and biodiversity conservation, and make sure that at least they adapt for change. And also climate improvements, especially in health, in education, and also gender equality. Women also need training. That's the next point that I think we need to also invest in. If you look at it, most of these situations that we go through when it comes to climate action or climate change, you realize not a lot of women know about it. So we need more training. We need to get a budget for women, for girls. We need to catch these girls young. I feel that there is quite great importance for us to make sure that at least there's a budget for that. We train people. They need to understand what is around climate change. So then I believe that you would have done well. And anytime that you equip or anytime that you train a woman, you would have done the greatest investment that you can think of, because we know that as mothers, we transcend information to generations that come. And this is what is quite important. And I feel that the moment that we invest when it comes to training, when it comes to resources, it's very important. We've got this for us. It's quite important for us to be training women, even especially in the marginalized areas. We need to make sure that it's coming through, create the education, the awareness, so that women can then get very much empowered. Women still need to be empowered. I still tend to say as much as, and I feel that there's a need for us to just have a deliberate policy which also allocates bit land, which allocates mines to women, so that at least they will also be equipped and also be able to fight climate change issues. The problem that we also have is that, like, for example, in my country, in Zimbabwe, a lot of women, they into agriculture. What it then means is that when agriculture fails, there's nothing much that they can do. They will actually be in stringent poverty. So I feel there is need for us to continue looking at measures that we need to put in place when it comes to allocation of women, be it in any resources which are there, be it land, mines. We feel that there is need for us. We need to be allocated land, be allocated any resources that are there, which men actually. And I feel that is quite a deliberate policy, which means we priority fight against climate change. You know, without gender equality today, sustainable and more equal future remains beyond our reach if we're not going to do this. And climate solutions must also improve. And I think we also need to invest in gender-specific statistics so that at least we can amplify the relationship between gender and climate. We need to also strengthen and enforce land rights. We need to promote women-led and women-focused sustainable solutions, particularly, especially in the grassroots, in the marginalized women. I feel that there is more need for us to have some resource management skills that we need to put in place so that at least we can have more women coming through. And I feel that there is need for us to create an ecosystem, which then enables women to be able to also have sustainable ways of living in whatever areas that they have. And also, even when it comes to agriculture production, we also need to be able to also manage and restore ecosystems that also have got diversity, so that women can then be at the front. For me, I feel we need women-led efforts. This is what all of us need to speak. Why can't we give women a chance? Why can't we let women be able to be at the top of all this? Because the moment that we do that, I think we would have done well. Because truly speaking, climate solutions must take gender response, and even financing, it needs to take a gender responsive approach, because women-led actions need to be sufficiently and equitably funded to achieve a just green transition. This is according to Nora Magero, who was a mechanical engineer and a renewable energy expert from Kenya. And I think also the one thing that I also need to say is, you see, women also, we need to come up with a plan, and I saw there are other honorable members who are also here. Let us come up with a regional policy, which I believe now this action plan that you want to be coming through with will also be able for us to have a regional conversation. We need an international conversation, that we speak together when it comes to legislation. We need punitive measures to be given to any people that would be environment degraders. For we know that this can also be able to also feed into whenever we have got climate change issues coming through. You realize if we've degraded the environment, if we've then not done well on the environment, you realize that we're actually going to be the worst hit, and it will be quite a challenge for us to be able to mitigate. And I think a lot of women need to be taught to more training when it comes to weather reports. They need to understand them. A lot of women from my constituency, I'm from a rural constituency. Most of the people there, even if you're going to tell them, I remember very well, I know we had Cyclone Idai here in Zimbabwe, which I think all the countries know about it. Cyclone Idai affected people in Manicaland area. It's not that people had not been told that Cyclone Idai was coming. They'd been told. But then now the issue is they were either resistant or they wouldn't understand what it was all about. And some of them didn't have alternative ways. That's why we are saying we need resources for us to be able to do this. And I think if you look at climate change with diseases, it's quite to the maximum that you can think of. Diseases emerge, a lot of pollution there, which happens whenever we are talking of climate change. So I think it's quite important for us to invest deliberately, teaching these children, even as early as even 9 years old. They need to understand. We need to make sure that we set a curricula, especially at the primary and secondary levels, which also speaks into this. And also, we also need to also have a provision for holidays for people, so that people can then be able to understand what this is all about. The reason why I'm saying we need provision for holidays, let me be clear on my point there. To say, if you look at it, you realize that if there is no holidays coming through to people, you realize that a lot of times that they are exposed to all these climate change issues, they then are forced to continue working, because at the end of the day, they need to sufficiently be able to fend, because they don't have any holidays coming through. So when I look at it, it's important for us to have a provision for holidays in whatever way that work, so that even when it comes, one will know that at least I'll be able to rest. That's number one. Number two, there is that provision, and someone will be able to know that even when it comes, they can then be able to sell off even their leave days and be able to mitigate within those ways. So I think we need that deliberate policy for us from the legislative side to make sure that at least we can be able to keep that. And finally, I'm going to continue speaking to say that the scope and scale of climate change is real, and I think if ever we are going to make sure that we address this, that means we've addressed a lot of issues in the community. We need to consider supporting the work that women do. And I think we also need to make sure that we take action against climate change. We also need to make sure that we need to get all these platforms like this, so that at least we'll get more champions and ambassadors coming through who can then be able to help us go on. And I think we need more visibility, be it on social media. We need to share. We need for us to have a gender equal climate action. And I'm happy you have it today. This is exactly what we need. And I'm quite happy that indeed, for us to be having a sustainable development in the country, we need to make sure women are at the top of this. And I'm happy to say that today is such a conversation. We need to catch the girls young. We need the women to be involved. The moment that we empower a woman, we've empowered a nation. I thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Honorable Tatenda. Those are very insightful remarks. I think we have so much to take home from everything that you've told us. You've talked about the increasing of women's representation in all spheres, not just politics. You've emphasized on the need to train women on climate change, especially women who are in the marginalized areas. You've emphasized on the need to have women-led and women-focused interventions. You've also talked about the need for financing to have a gender lens. Thank you so much for those insightful remarks. You've also called for something very interesting. You've talked about the need for a regional policy on climate change, and I think that's an important conversation to begin having. You've also talked about having punitive measures for people who interfere with climate. Thank you so much, Honorable Tatenda. I hope you'll remain with us as we move towards the plenary session. But before we get there, we'll be having our final speaker. But before I introduce our final speaker, I would ask all our participants, if you have any questions, you can ask us through the chat session or through the question and answer session. Honorable Tatenda, we can see you've put your camera on. Thank you so much for being here with us and making time despite your busy schedule in Tanzania. Our final speaker will be taking us through the way forward. We have several civil society organizations. We also have grassroots organizations present with us, for instance, Roots Kenya, who are present with us. So he'll be taking us through what civil societies can do. Our final speaker is Fred Ouma. Fred Ouma, I see your camera is already on. You're ready to take us through this session. Fred Ouma he has 8 years working experience on climate change activism, climate governance, and international climate change negotiations. He currently holds the position of Programs Officer at Transparency International Kenya. He's a climate change negotiator under UNFCCC Kenya and climate change negotiator under the African Group of Negotiators. Other than this, he has a passion for gender issues. He's participated in gender negotiations under the UNFCCC and led in the drafting of African submissions on the implementation of the Gender Action Plan, identifying areas of progress, areas of improvement, and further work to be undertaken in subsequent action plans. Under the African Group of Negotiators expert support. Thank you so much, Fred, for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Florence. And you may have already realized that we need both the men, women, and everybody on the table, because you may have noticed the men on the men who are part of the panelists, I think, spoke for about 5 to 10 minutes. The ladies also had the moment to share their passion. as far as climate and gender is concerned. Allow me to appreciate your team at the University of Pretoria, because one of the challenges we've had is getting the academia on board to engage in such conversations. And I must say that this is commendable for the Center for Human Rights to organize a webinar around the Gender Action Plan, around any issue within the Convention on Climate Change. Having said that, I think Tenda has done half my work, so I'll basically not take more than 5 minutes. She has done she has highlighted a lot of action points that I think we should have recorded in terms of way forward. Having said that, I think one thing that we have to realize is that gender has a central place in our climate change negotiations. And if you look at the broader objectives or the broader areas or goals that we have been working on, just like Honorable Christine had indicated, is one basically that speaks to participation and representation of both women, men, youth within the UNFCCC processes. And secondly, basically increasing awareness and support for development and effective implementation of gender responsive climate policy and action at both the regional, national, and local levels. If you look at the preamble of the Paris Agreement, which we are currently implementing, it highlights that parties should, when taking action to address climate change, respect, promote, and consider their respective obligations on human rights, the right to health, the right of indigenous peoples, local communities, migrant children, persons with disability, etc., etc. Of course, as well as gender equality, empowerment of women, and intergenerational equity. And I think this is basically what underpins the conversation we're having today, as far as human rights and gender and climate change is concerned. Christine already did justice to the Gender Action Plan. So I'm basically going to go to way forward on each and every aspect, and I'll try my best to crystallize some of these issues so that we have a very clear way forward in terms of how we proceed. It's important to note that while we negotiated the Gender Action Plan at COP23, and the outcome of which was captured under Decision 3CP23, as you had highlighted in your flyer, we basically negotiated an enhancement of the Lima Work Program and the Gender Action Plan at COP25. And now we have an enhanced Lima Work Program and Agenda Action Plan that goes up to 2024. It is also important to note that the first intermediate review of the enhanced Lima Work Program is scheduled in the next week also, during the May-June negotiations scheduled from June 6th to June 16th in Bonn, Germany, where we are going to basically score how we have been able to implement the Gender Action Plan from 2019 to 2022. Having sorry for that. So having highlighted that, so that is basically our first way forward, is to basically look at, do our own civil society assessment as to how the Gender Action Plan under the Enhanced Lima Work Program has been implemented so far, the specific activity areas that were identified within the 5 broader priority areas that Christine highlighted, which of course was very specific as to which stakeholders should do what. And there were a lot of opportunities for civil society organizations as well as other relevant organizations to implement those particular elements of the Gender Action Plan. It is also important to note that financing is based on planning. And basically, the way we are now implementing the Paris Agreement is through the nationally determined contributions. It is important that civil societies across Africa work with the relevant ministries and departments to unpack their nationally determined contributions within the context of gender, applying a gender lens to the nationally determined contribution. It is also important to inform civil society organizations that there is need for countries to come up with national climate change action plans as national domestic policy documents for the implementation of the NDC, and therefore ensure that issues of gender are embedded in those particular action plans that are targeted at the broader goals as identified in the nationally determined contributions. When we do that, or after we have done that, it becomes very easy for targeted financing and to use gender as one of the criteria for financing climate change projects, both mitigation and adaptation, by ensuring that each and every project approved for financing has a strong element on gender. And this is work that civil societies can engage in at the national level. One of the challenges we've had, which also points us to another action area, is that in many countries, the Ministry of Gender is separate from the Ministry of Environment, where climate change is domiciled. And it has been very difficult bringing these two ministries on the table to discuss and agree on a climate change and gender strategy that would then fit into the implementation of our international agreements and national policy documents for climate change response. And this is also an opportunity for advocacy for civil society organizations to pursue and ensure that every country is putting in place a climate change and gender strategy that would then inform how we plan, how we do climate change action planning in a manner that corresponds with what we have communicated as our goals. It is also important to note that the UNFCCC provides for countries to nominate gender focal points with clear responsibilities which have also been highlighted in the gender action plan. You'll see that the responsible parties column speaks to the gender focal points in certain instances. And it is therefore important that civil societies advocate for countries where they are based or countries that they work with to nominate these gender focal points, which are basically the linkage national governments have with the UNFCCC. And then they will be able to ensure that we're able to implement our actions. But even when we report biennially, that we're able to report how we have integrated elements under the gender action plan in our response to climate change as we work towards the achievement of the temperature goal of 1.5 in a manner that promotes sustainable development and eradicates poverty within our national governments. I think one other thing that we have to take into consideration, and this is now for you, Florence, is that if you look at certain elements of the gender action plan, there are very specific areas that speak to the role of the academia and elements that the academia can be proactive in. We have always had challenges with having availability of sex disaggregated data for gender analysis, taking into consideration multidimensional factors that inform gender responsive climate policies. And this is an area that the academia needs to support governments on in ensuring that this data is made available and that this data can be used in targeted planning, and also ensuring that reporting is done as appropriate, and that we are able to comprehensively highlight how projects and programs have targeted different marginalized groups within our societies when we do reporting and when we basically report against our commitments to the UNFCCC. There is also an opportunity for the academia to do policy briefs and discussion papers focusing on some of these experiences, issues of technology as had been highlighted by Christine, among other elements as highlighted in the Gender Action Plan, so that whenever we are going for the intermediate review, we have evidence and data to show how we have been able to implement the Gender Action Plan and be able to demonstrate progress and achievement of some of the activities or some of the objectives we have decided to pursue as far as the implementation of the Gender Action Plan is concerned. I'll stop there since we need enough time to also get feedback from the audience. Thank you, Florence.
Thank you so much, Fred. I think that was quite insightful. It fed really well into what Honorable Tatenda had begun. I think we've learned so much. The civil society organizations that are on the call, I think they have a lot to take home and analyze, especially those that are implementing climate change using a gender lens. We thank you so much for all the speakers for staying with us. I can see all the speakers are still on board with us. So we'll now move to the plenary session. Anyone who has a question, please feel free to raise your hand. You also have a function at the bottom of your screen where you can ask questions through the Q&A section. I can also see there's been active chat, so my colleagues will be going through to ask any questions to the panelists. We have our first hand raised, Kai Crooks. Kai Crooks, you have the floor. You can ask your question. Kai Crooks. Okay, I can see there's also someone who's using the Faculty of Law. Please, you can unmute now and ask your question.
Thank you very much. This is Kevin Bakulumpaji from Uganda.
I'm sorry, Kevin, we seem to have lost you. Okay, I'll take the question in the Q&A. The rate of illiteracy is very high in Africa, particularly girls' education. That being said, the education of women is a central point in fighting climate change. How can we help women understand the impacts of climate, and how can women contribute effectively to combating change when the rate of illiteracy is very high among women? This question is from Akot Makur-Chut, who's a lawyer and activist from South Sudan, currently living in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you, Akot, for your question. I think any of the panelists can feel free to answer the question as we wait for our attendees to unmute their mics. I'll repeat the question. The question is basically, just to rephrase it, it's about the rate of illiteracy being very high, and particularly for girls. So the question is, how can we help women understand the impacts of climate change and how women can contribute towards effectively, how they can combat climate change when the rate of illiteracy is very high among women. Olivia, I think you want to take the question.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Olivia.
Yes, Mr. Akot is very spot on in terms of linking climate change, illiteracy, and the impacts that it has on women and girls. I'd just like to emphasize that climate change is a social economic issue as much as it is an environmental phenomenon. And in order for us to combat it, we need to address the underlying social economic challenges that women face, and education and health is at the top of those issues. I think also we need to begin to integrate climate change knowledge in our education system. I've seen a number of countries adopting climate change literacy in their curriculum, and Kenya is one of the pioneers in this, and I applaud that very much. I would want to urge many governments or all governments across Africa to do the same, to ensure that even as we rally for the girl child to be educated, the education would be quite focused on the challenges of today and of the threats that they face in terms of climate change impacts. So thank you indeed, that's a good question. And also it means that we need a multi-sectoral approach. This is no longer an environmental issue. This is no longer a scientific issue. We need to bring educationists on board, sociologists on board, health experts on board, in order for us to come up with multi-dimensional solutions that can enable us to adapt to climate change at a much faster rate than we are currently in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia, for your comments. I think you've answered the question sufficiently. Just waiting. There's another question on the question and answer. Yeah, this is Kevin. I believe he had tried to unmute his mic. His question is to Honorable Christine. Since Uganda enacted the climate, okay, sorry, I can't. Since Uganda enacted the Climate Change Act, what areas would support for development of regulations ensure women's participation?
Yes, currently we do have a climate change law, and we are in the process of establishing regulations to implement this law. And we anticipate that all activists, gender activists, shall be invited when we are formulating some of these regulations. Right now, we are putting pressure on the minister in charge of environment to ensure that the establishment of regulations starts off, because we feel it is late. It was due to COVID that we didn't, the process didn't take strict guidelines like we had stipulated. But anytime from now, that is the next step. And we shall invite all gender activists to take part in the formulation of some of these regulations. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Honorable Christine. There's another question from Maureen Magak. She says that climate change is underfinanced in Africa. Even more so, the little resources invested in the actions is now underutilized and exploited. How can we ensure climate change accountability in Africa? Maureen is from Lend a Voice Africa in Mombasa.
Probably the other colleague of ours who responded to finance will add on some of the information, but I am suggesting that most countries have failed. Some countries have failed to establish a fund specific for climate change funds, and it is a serious challenge even in Uganda. Because when we combine all the climate finances in the national consolidated funds, in most cases, climate change does not come out as a priority. And most of the priorities for our countries, they are related to disaster response, not management, as in planning, reducing on risks. So it is important that we establish funds specific to climate change that are reinforced. So after that, we have other similar funds, like road funds. They are established other funds in different countries. We can borrow a bit from the management of those funds to help us guide this fund, and such that we establish a basket that can even attract people to put in money. We can even attract people who provide the finances to come and work towards the implementation of the funds. That is even possible. Thank you.
Florence. Hello. Hello.
Honorable James, we can hear you.
Yes, I have been interrupted. I have another urgent meeting that I want to attend to.
No problem. Thank you so much for joining us and for your insightful comments. Thank you so much. Thank you, Honorable Christine, for answering the question. I think there's another question on the question and answer, but as I read it out, I believe Kevin had also joined and wanted to ask his question. Kevin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Am I audible now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Honorable Christine, thank you so much. And I admire your work on climate change. It has been very, very material to have you here. Sorry, my question was not well phrased, but I was asking, now that we have the Act, which area in the law would you prefer to develop regulations first so that we see women coming up? Because it provides for areas where they do people participation, areas of mechanisms of testing, determining the levels of climate emissions and all that. But which areas in particular would you cite out as areas for development of regulations that can go ahead and implement this act, women participation? Any specific areas that you see that can help us in that regard? Thank you.
So I'm supposed to respond. Based on for example, our climate change law has something like 7 sub-themes, but the area of coordination, when you look at coordination, we were looking at how we can increase the participation of women in the issues and the actions related to climate change. There is also the issue of measurement. Measuring mechanisms is also very important for us to show women that also they are independent or their individual actions have a contribution to climate change management. That has been lacking so much here in Uganda. Most natural resources, when you look at the committees managing most of the natural resources, it is usually men, and women feel they don't need to take part in leadership of management of some of these natural resources. That is so important. And then we have adaptation and the replication in the different sectors. It is also very important that we include gender-sensitive technologies and practices that have been approved in the implementation of adaptation actions stipulated within our climate change law. Because when you look at most actions, especially in the agriculture sector, in the energy sector, down to the end user, you see that it is mostly women who are supposed to really mind about the implementation of these actions. So, the priority, for example, Uganda's priority is too much on adaptation for climate change other than the mitigation side. So we believe that since women take care and that in most cases the end users, we would put emphasis in ensuring that most of the provisions under the GAP are included in the regulations towards the implementation of the provided for adaptation practices.
Thank you so much, Honorable Christine, for that. There's another question in the question and answer section. There's a risk of essentializing the divide between men and women within gendered conversations such as this one. How do we have conversations without painting as victims, but as leaders at the same time, recognizing the existing inequalities? This is Kaone. As we take that question, we can also have more questions from other attendees. Okay, I think we also have, yes?
I was going to try and address that question. Thank you very much. Let me see who asked the question. Thank you very much, Kion. That's a very good question, but I think we have come on board as feminists, as women, at a time when the damage has been done. So much as we are trying to do our best, we're actually doing our best. We have so many women doing their activism and activities and climate mitigation and trying to help with conversion of climate change and all these things. We still have, for every one woman that is coming out, for everyone Honorable Christine, for everyone Florence, for everyone Hamira, we have 1,000 or more people, and these are females behind us that have no voice, that are not educated, and that have been affected immensely by all these catastrophes and the crisis. Like as previous speaker said, our society has been patriotic. I mean, it has been what's the word she used?
Patriarchy.
Patriarchy. Yeah, it has had a patriarchy for so many years, like for thousands and thousands of years. And at a time when we have only tried, probably the feminism movement has only been alive for less than 100 years. So we have so many years of damage that has been done to work with. Much as we are doing our best, like I told you, we have Honorable Christine, but for every one of us we have in the front, we have 1,000 of us that have been affected. So much as we are trying, we are also a solution at a bigger level. But I always like pointing people to the Project Drawdown, because it's the only solution manual that has been put up since we started complaining about climate change. And Project Drawdown has listed empowering women and girl education, and making sure women receive finances, making sure women's small stakeholders are taken care of. All these things lead to a huge solution and a huge reduction in CO2 emission gigatons. For me, I believe, much as if this is really your problem, you're going to really have a bigger problem in future, because women are a big solution. Besides refrigeration and everything, women are a huge part of the climate solution, and we're going to still talk about it. But much as we look like we are so many women out here, we're actually very few women, because for every one woman in front of you right now that has a voice and can speak about something, or has a position that can make influence, they're like double or triple 1,000 people behind her, and these are females, girls, mothers, single mothers, all these people. So the damage that has been done is so immense that it's very, very, very early for you to be tired of us talking about what is happening to women. So I believe the solutions are there. We have shown you solutions. For me alone, I work with so many women that have activities they're doing in communities. I myself, I told you, I train women, and I train women in all the languages I know. And I train them, even women that don't know, who have not gone to school and upper school level. I still go and speak in my mother language, or in the language they understand, so that they understand that climate change is happening, so that they can actually say, okay, I am seeing floods. My house is getting full of water, but it's because of climate change. And if I don't litter and I pick this plastic up and I keep the plastic well, I can actually reduce on my carbon footprint. So I think I've answered so many questions, but I think the solution is there. Women are doing their best. We're actually doing our best. We're not only claiming to be victims. That is why you see people like Florence are heading this movement, such webinars, because we're not only claiming to be victims, we're actually saying, yes, I am impacted the worst, but I can also be a solution like this. So even seeing honorables talk about these things, that alone is a testimony that women have come from far, and we are doing our best to get solutions for climate change. Thank you very much. I think someone else can add on that, on my answer. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Hamira. I think you have adequately tackled the question. We are also running out of time. So Thank you so much for answering the question. And thank you to all our panelists for the very exciting conversation. I can see the chat, there's still a lot of conversation going on. So thank you so much to everyone for making time to be a part of our webinar as we discuss this very important issue. As Hamira has said, the conversation has only just begun. So we hope that you'll continue to join us as we push for the implementation of the as we push for implementation of the Gender Action Plan. We shall now have our closing remarks and vote of thanks. We have Susan, who is the Women's Rights, a representative of the Women's Rights Unit. Susan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Florence. This has been a very exciting webinar, and I surely have actually learned a lot from everyone. I just want to highlight a few things. I think, first of all, we can all agree that one of the important things that has come out of this webinar is that the participation of women is key. We started off from a point where we all agree that women are disproportionately affected by climate change. But moving on from there, their participation is key, whether in decision-making or within the communities. So one of the objectives of this webinar, I want to believe, has been to open up this conversation. And I want to just say at this point that beyond the activists that have joined us today, the civil society organizations, the policymakers who are fighting for this, I think it is important for us to take this conversation to the ordinary person, to the ordinary woman on the street. I think this has been highlighted by a lot of the speakers, that it is important for us to actually ensure that the ordinary woman on the street understands the impact that climate change has on their lives and what it is that they can do to actually mitigate it. And I think we are all agreed that the issue of climate change is not something that just one nation, one community can deal with, but it is something that affects us all globally. And therefore, tackling it from a community perspective, whether in our region or globally, is very important. I just want to take this opportunity to thank our esteemed panelists. Thank you very much for taking the time to come out and share your expertise with us. It was a very good mix of panelists, from the policymakers who are making the policies, the activists who are very passionate about the work that they're doing, the civil society organizations that are working on it. And I hope that this has been an opportunity for all of us to exchange ideas on how we can actually implement a lot of the policies that I was hearing that are being put in place, and to ensure that they are financed. I also want to thank the Women's Rights Clinic, who actually organized this as part of their Masters in Human Rights and Democratization program. Well done for putting this in place. And thank you very much for reaching out to people who could enrich this conversation. And I just want to thank the participants. I think the conversation has been very lively. The people that have joined in were very active and interested in the conversations that were going on. So I just want to thank you for taking the time out for the last 2 hours to join us. And I hope that you can also continue to engage with the Center for Human Rights. I think the ball has been put in our court by the last speaker in terms of what academia can do. And as the Center for Human Rights, there are always projects that we have going on, and research and so forth within the different countries across the continent. So continue engaging with us as we are always looking for collaborators and resource persons in the different countries that we work in. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan, for that. And thank you, everyone. I think we can continue the conversation. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Florence, for inviting us to participate.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.